It was a Tuesday morning, the kind of morning that felt like it had come straight out of a slow-mo vying dream, where everything seemed calm, but the tension in the air was thick enough to slice with a knife. The sun had barely crested over the horizon, casting a soft, golden light over the farmland that stretched endlessly into the distance. And there, on the wraparound porch of his sprawling mansion, stood Marcus Blackwood cold, calculating, and consumed by the kind of power that only a man with his wealth could dream of. At 45 years old, Marcus had it all. Over 50,000 acres of prime farmland in Nebraska, 3 major grain processing plants. His empire, built from the blood, sweat, and tears of countless people he'd crushed along the way, was untouchable. The kind of power that made small towns like the one he ruled tremble in his wake. But despite all that success, despite all the riches and the land and the control, Marcus Blackwood was a man hollowed out by greed, a man who saw everything, people, animals, even the land itself, as something to be used, something to be bent to his will. And Henry Peterson, well, Henry was just one of those obstacles, wasn't he? Just a small, old man with a 200-acre farm that stood in the way of Marcus' plans for expansion. A farm that had been in Henry's family for generations. A farm that wasn't for sale, no matter how many threats Marcus threw at him. That's where this story starts, right here, with 2 men at the opposite ends of the world, one fighting to hold on to the past, the other desperate to bend the world to his whims. For 3 long years, Marcus had pushed Henry to sell. He bought up all the land surrounding Henry's farm, making sure to trap the old man with no way out. He had politicians in his pocket, bankers in his back pocket, lawyers who could find the smallest violation and turn it into a legal nightmare. But Henry was stubborn, and as each day passed, Marcus could feel the weight of that stubbornness growing. The old man refused to sell, refused to bend, and that, in Marcus' world, was unforgivable. One morning, during a strategy meeting with his lawyer, Jonathan Steele, Marcus was boiling over. "That old fool is costing me millions," Marcus spat, his words sharp. "Every day that farm remains independent, it's a reminder that I can be beaten. I won't have it." Steele, always the voice of reason, had tried to talk him down. "Marcus, we've tried everything legal. If we push any further, we risk drawing attention. The state attorney general might get involved." But Marcus wasn't listening. He was already planning something far more insidious, something that would solve the Peterson problem once and for all. You see, Marcus had a bull. Not just any bull, mind you, but a 2,200-pound Brahma cross-named destroyer. The kind of bull that had already killed 2 other bulls and sent 3 ranch hands to the hospital. Most people would have put down an animal like that, but Marcus wasn't like most people. No, Marcus saw opportunity. Destroyer was dangerous, aggressive, a perfect tool for what Marcus had in mind. Henry's farm bordered Marcus' land, and the fence that separated their properties had been damaged in a recent storm. Marcus had, by accident, delayed repairs to his side, leaving weak points in the fence. Weak points that could easily be breached. So, he did the unthinkable. He planned to drive Destroyer toward Henry's property while Henry was out walking, making sure the bull would break through the fence, and the resulting tragedy would look like a tragic accident. A wild bull attacking an old man. And when Henry was gone, Marcus would swoop in and buy the land at a fraction of its value from his grieving granddaughter, Sarah. As Marcus put his plan into motion, he had no idea what he was about to unleash. He didn't know that Henry Peterson wasn't just any old man. Before inheriting the family farm, Henry had served in the Vietnam War, a medic who had earned a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart for saving lives in the most brutal of circumstances. And Henry didn't just understand human pain, he understood animal pain too. He had a bond with the creatures on his farm that ran deeper than most people could understand. He'd rescued animals, nursed them back to health, and learned to read their every movement and emotion. On the morning of the attack, Marcus had positioned himself and his men along the fence line. Jake Morrison, his head of security, along with 2 ranch hands, was waiting to drive Destroyer toward the weakened fence. They all waited for Henry, who, as usual, was out for his morning walk, unaware that his life was about to change forever. And just as Marcus expected, Henry came out of his house, walking with his familiar stride, the oak walking stick that had been carved by his son clutched in his hand. He moved slowly, the weight of his years on his shoulders, but his eyes were sharp, full of the life that refused to be extinguished. He walked toward the northwest corner of his property, toward the place where Marcus' men waited. But then, something changed. something Marcus hadn't planned for. Henry stopped. He heard the noises coming from Marcus' side of the fence, the sound of cattle in distress. He knew something wasn't right. And instead of continuing his usual walk, Henry pulled out his phone and began recording. "I'm hearing unusual livestock noises from the Blackwood property," Henry said, speaking clearly into the camera. "Given the pattern of harassment I've been experiencing, I'm documenting this for my own protection." Marcus, watching from his position, cursed under his breath. This wasn't part of the plan. Henry wasn't supposed to be recording. He was supposed to be walking helpless, unaware. "Abort!" Marcus barked into his radio. "Pull back." I said pull back. But it was too late. Destroyer, driven by sheer aggression, burst through the weakened fence and stormed onto Henry's property. And that's when everything changed. Henry stood his ground. He didn't run. He didn't panic. With the bull charging toward him, he raised his hand, speaking to the animal in a calm, steady voice. "Easy there, big fellow. I know you're scared and confused. This isn't your fault." And something miraculous happened. The bull, whose anger and pain had been fueled by cruelty and fear, began to slow. His ears, once pinned back in aggression, twitched forward as if he were actually listening. Slowly, Destroyer stopped, planting his hooves into the ground. Henry continued, never breaking eye contact with the massive animal. "I can see the pain in your eyes. Someone's been hurting you, haven't they?" And in that moment, Marcus, watching from the bushes with growing horror, felt something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. But not for Henry. No, Marcus feared the consequences. The plan was failing. And worse, it was all being recorded. This wasn't a random attack. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. And now, there was Evy Danke. As Henry slowly extended his hand toward Destroyer, the massive bull took a cautious step forward, lowering his head. For the first time in his life, Destroyer was not treated as a weapon, but as a living being in pain, something that deserved compassion. "You're not a killer, are you?" Henry whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You're just a Tim, like me." And at that moment, Marcus realized the truth. He had underestimated Henry. He had underestimated the power of kindness. The video Sarah uploaded later that day, showing Henry and Destroyer, went viral. It wasn't just a story about a man and a bull, it was a story about redemption, compassion, and the power of forgiveness. But the story didn't end there. Sarah, a law student, recognized the deliberate attack on her grandfather's life. She teamed up with Detective Maria Santos, who, after investigating Marcus' actions, uncovered a web of corruption, harassment, and conspiracy that led directly back to Marcus Blackwood. In the courtroom, Marcus was sentenced for attempted murder, conspiracy, and animal abuse. He admitted to his years of illegal active ties, and his confession shook the very foundation of his empire. But the most powerful moment came when Henry took the stand. Instead of asking for revenge, Henry spoke about the power of forgiveness. "You know," Henry said, looking at Marcus, "I believe there's a difference between justice and vengeance. Justice means making sure this man can never hurt anyone again. But vengeance would mean forgetting that even the most damaged souls can sometimes remember what love feels like." And that's where it all came full circle. Marcus, sentenced to 15 years in prison, was ordered to work at an animal sanctuary for the duration of his sentence. There, he would learn what it meant to care for the very animals he had used as tools of destruction. Years later, Marcus would be granted parole. But instead of returning to his life of wealth and power, he asked Henry for a chance to work at the sanctuary. And Henry, in a moment of grace, gave him that second chance. Marcus worked for years, rehabilitating abused animals, learning the true meaning of empathy. And Gentle, the bull that once tried to kill him, became his closest companion. Today, Gentle Heart's Animal Sanctuary stands as a symbol of transformation and hope. Henry's farm is now a place where animals are saved, where people learn about the power of compassion, and where forgiveness reigns over vengeance. So, I'll leave you with this question. Do you believe in redemption? Can someone like Marcus Blackwood truly change? Or is there some part of him that will always be the man who tried to destroy everything in his path? Let me know what you think in the comments below.